Hi there, everybody. You may or may not have seen that before the Christmas holidays, I was posting pictures from my Actors on Actors Oscar edition shoot, in which I shot about 30 actors that were sort of had Oscar nominations or Oscar buzz around them over the course of 3 days. It was a lot of fun. It was very intense, and people have always asked me, "Oh, what was that person like? And what did you talk about with that person? And how did you get them to smile?" And so I thought I'd do this video. There's going to be two videos, part one, part two, where I just go through the images very quickly and sort of spark off any memories I have from the shoot. And what better way to start off than a Julia Roberts? You got to start off with a bang. And she comes on set always in such a good mood, so joyful, so easy to shoot. And it's so funny because she has this absolute star power that I don't even know if she has it or not, but she comes on and everybody is just gobsmacked. She's gorgeous. She comes on set and she's easy breezy, and then all of a sudden she smiles or laughs, and you take the picture and everybody's just super happy. So love Julia, amazing. And we shot her with her old friend Sean Penn. I think that she was saying that they've known each other since before she was even an actress. So it was very fun to see these old friends on set together and how they sort of interacted. Then I got to shoot Sean Penn on his own. Fascinating guy. Very intense, very cool, chill. His face is so amazing to shoot because it's so full of character. I could have easily shot him for a couple of hours. We were talking about movies. We were talking about the idea that nowadays we spend so much time talking about movies rather than just watching movies. And there's something lost in that. Then we moved on to these two, Ariana and Adam Sandler. Really beautiful to see these guys interacting. He was so sweet, Adam Sandler, and he almost sort of had like a sort of protective fatherly vibe in this particular setup. Ariana was so excited to work with him. Just a hero to her, and she was just couldn't believe that she was on set with him. Then I got to shoot Adam by himself. Now Adam is a very interesting person because he is, I wouldn't say he's necessarily the most comfortable in front of a still camera, right? Maybe on movie camera he's fine, he's moving pictures, moving image, but when it comes to a still camera, he's very gracious, very nice. He wants to make sure you get the shot, but he doesn't exactly sort of sit there going, "Oh, should we do this? And should we try this?" And da, da, da. He's more like, "Okay, buddy, you got it. You want to do a couple more? Okay, okay, you got it. Just okay, yeah." And the only time I've shot him before was when we were doing this sort of party scene, and I could tell if it was a bit sort of, needed a bit of direction. So I just said, "You see that glass of water over there? I want you to throw it at me." And he was like, "Yeah, you sure, buddy?" And I said, yeah, just throw it just at my chest, not at the camera. And so he threw it at me, and we got this picture of this water flying through the air, and that was fun. But on this particular shoot, this one here, it's a portrait studio. And so I have to say, I love this picture of him because, again, he's like this sort of, he's this comedy legend, and this is quite a sort of poignant and poised picture, but it perfectly sums up how he feels in front of the still camera without looking awkward. Then we got moved on to the single of Ariana, and I've shot her a couple of times before, and she is just so stunning, so easy to shoot. The angles, the neck, vibes of Audrey Hepburn, and just super easy. And she poses so well. I mean, she could be a model. So, and then we came on to these two stars of musicals, and in full admiration of each other. I believe they're old friends. And it was just very calm. And it was just like, "How you doing? Everything is great. Okay, very nice." And then when we moved on to the singles, so I'd been doing so many close-ups of everybody that I felt like with this fashion that she was wearing, I really needed to do a full length. The trouble is, all the close-ups were so beautiful of her. She had these incredibly long nails, and she was doing all this stuff with her face and framing her face with her hands, and it was so beautiful. But the trouble with these shoots is that I do so many variations of each person very, very quickly, and then I can only choose one image per person. So I'm going to have to release the other images at some point. But anyway, we chose the full length, and also I love the tattoos on her leg. I love the fashion and everything. And then we moved on to a single of Hugh, and it was so much fun. We were talking about finding our passions in life and living each day as if it's your last, and sort of not having any regrets. And then I said to him, listen, I just want you to move around a bit. And he was obviously, and he's a dancer and he's a singer and he's a performer. And I thought I can get something extra out of him. And so we started doing this thing. And I said, just give me your hands, a bit sort of like some hands towards the camera. And again, because he's such a great mover, we got so many great pictures and I can only show you one. And then Mr. Superman came onto set. He was so cool, very rugged, definitely a vibe of a young Marlon Brando, that kind of like sort of just rawness. And very cool, very sort of tough, but handsome. And so he was very cool to hang out with. And we paired him up with Mr. Jonathan Bailey, who is another beautiful guy. But fascinating also to see them both together because they're both extremely handsome guys, but very different. You've got one who's much more sort of a broader, like Marlon Brando kind of thing. And then Jonathan Bailey is much more of a sort of a fine, good looking, more defined, let's say. And they got on immediately straight away. I think they may have met each other before, but they immediately just sort of got into the same groove and were laughing and teasing each other. And then, because we had a few extra minutes with them, I said, okay, let's just quickly change the light. And I want you to pretend that I've just sort of bumped into you, like literally sort of shoved you in a pub and said something mean about your mum. And I want you to pick a fight with me. And they looked at each other and then just immediately looked back at me and started screaming at me like, what the fuck you, blah, blah, blah. And I went click, 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 done, next. And then I got to do some singles of Jonathan Bailey. Again, he got some such beautiful close-ups, like really super tight, and he was so stunning. But we ended up choosing this shot instead because we wanted some variation because there were so many close-ups. And it was funny because as I was taking pictures of him, I said, where in England are you from? And he said, oh, Oxford. And I said, oh, I spent my teens in Oxford. Where did you? And he said, whereabouts? And I was like, well, I went to school at this place. And his eyes went wide open. And he said, that's where I went to school. And we tried to high five and completely missed each other because we were really cool. Then Mr. Jesse Plemons came on and he was so nice. And we were talking about how I'd shot his wife, Kirsten Dunst, many years ago, back in 2007, and how she had, I think at this point when I was he was very, super cool to take pictures of. And as I was taking pictures, I said, yeah, Kirsten Dunst, your wife, when I shot her at the end in 2007 or 2008, at the end of this very fashiony Harper's Bazaar shoot, it was on a very hot day. And at the end of the shoot, while she was still all dressed up in hair and makeup and a big ball gown, I said, right, we got the shot. That's the last shot, done. And she said, are we done? 100% are we done? And then she just literally jumped into the pool with all of her clothes on, all her jewels and everything. And as she came out, she looked so stunning. And I took a picture and I said, wait, stay there. And that ended up being the cover. And he was laughing along to that story. And he said, yeah, that sounds like my wife. And we teamed him up with Michael B. Jordan. And now apparently it turns out that when they got on set, they hadn't seen each other for years and years. And I think they were in some sort of football movie way back when. So they were very much enjoying seeing each other again. Michael B. Jordan, such a good looking guy. We were talking very briefly. We only had a few minutes with him. We were talking about how many hats he has to wear on set, like the director and the actor and et cetera, et cetera. So loved all this stuff. I asked him again, I want you to sort of imagine that I just said something rude to you. And I want you to sort of, again, play with the hands and talk with your hands and then look at me like, what did you say? Then Miss Tayana Taylor came on and she was so lovely. Pure positivity, pure love. She comes on and as a way of saying hello to everybody, she gives everybody on set a hug. From me to the digital technician, to the set designer, to the guy holding the light. Just pure positivity and stunning. So beautiful. And we teamed her up with Oscar Isaac, a beautiful man. Such structure in his face. And they were in pure admiration of each other and just looked so stunning together. I could have taken pictures of these guys for a long time. Next was Miss Jennifer Lawrence, and as soon as she came on set, we were talking about babies and sleeping schedules and all that sort of parenting hacks. And she was with Mr. Leonardo DiCaprio. And I'd shot with him before for an Esquire shoot alongside Quentin Tarantino and Brad Pitt. So we were talking about how sort of precise Quentin Tarantino is with his choice of props and sets. And I think we also talked about how hard it is to give up smoking. Anyway, follow along for part 2. So here's part 2 of my Actors on Actors Oscar edition. We start off with Jacob Elordi, super tall, super handsome, quite intense in a sort of like calm, mysterious way, which adds to his allure. Um, we were talking about how much press is done for movies these days, and does that add or subtract to the movie experience? I think we also talked about rugby. And then we teamed him up with Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth came straight onto set and said to him, "My daughter's going to be so jealous of me because she's in love with you." And which Jacob found very funny, but he was very charming and gracious about it. Um, and then we shot Gwyneth on her own. Because we had done so many close-up portraits of her, which was so beautiful. But she was wearing this beautiful dress, and we'd done so many close-ups of everybody else that we thought we needed a break and sort of have somebody, if they had great fashion on, then we might as well show it. Then we moved on to these two, Jeremy and Kate. Jeremy, he's got such a cool look. I think he came on to set with this black polo neck and his hair all ruffled in his face, and he looked sort of like a very sort of 70s, late 60s. I think it reminded me a bit of Steve McQueen in that movie Bullet. And then Kate Hudson is always just an absolute joy to have on set. And I think they'd known each other before, so they got on very well. And I was kind of trying to put them in these positions. I said, "Listen, why don't you just hang off him, and he can sort of be hands in his pocket and quite nonchalant, and you can sort of put an arm around him." And I think she was very much leading the dance, let's say. And then with Kate, I said, "Listen, let's just mix it up a bit. I've got lots of beautiful sort of still portraits of you. Let's move around the studio a bit, and I want you to sort of talk to me like you're an Italian, get your hands involved." And I think she mentioned that she had some sort of Sicilian background in her family. So she was like, "I got this. Get behind the camera. I'm done doing it." And then with Jeremy, I didn't want any action. I didn't want any movement. I didn't want any full length. I just wanted to focus on a very calm picture of him where it was miniature movements, miniature directions. And I just said, "Listen, I just want you to be sort of like that, sort of like almost like tortured actor, the sort of like trying to sort of listen, but you're a bit bored about what I'm talking about. And, you're a bit hiding your face a bit. And there's just sort of a little bit of that sort of artistic angst in there." Now, with these two, it was just pure platonic love. As soon as they got on set with each other, they were just arm in arm, talking about baby. I think she just had a baby recently, and we were all talking about sort of parenting and the joys of early parenthood and stuff. And then I just stepped back, and they were just so loving towards each other. It was a beautiful thing to see. And then, as I said before, I wanted to try and mix it up a bit, so not all have all these portraits very tight. And she had this great fashion on, and we'd done all these very close-up portraits, and she has this beautiful little sort of like smile, half smile. And I said, "I just want you to be absolutely nothing, just very straight, maybe one hand in the pocket, that's it, but just super straight." And I thought it was a nice sort of mixture to the story. And then with Colin, I love shooting Colin. He's always so... he loves it, as far as I know, he loves an intense conversation. And I very much don't like small talk about talking about the weather or whatever it is. And so whether we have 2 minutes together or we have half an hour together, we go straight deep into conversations about sobriety, about parenthood, about where you live on the globe and what it means, etc., etc. But he's got, such a beautiful, intense look. I love his eyebrows. Every time I take a picture of him, he's just it's awesome to take portraits of. And then Mr. Stellan Skarsgård came on, and this was such a joyous experience for me because he was supposed to come on with his son. He was taking pictures with his son, and his son was delayed. So we started on the single portraits of Stellan, and we just spoke about. I put him on a chair in the middle of the studio, and I had the camera in my hand, and we were talking about, again, fatherhood. We were talking about. He was giving me some parenting tips. We were talking about what it means to live in Sweden. He had a very dry sense of humor, and it was just fascinating. And whilst he's talking and whilst he's thinking, I'm taking pictures of him. And as I said before, the annoying thing about this shoot is that I get to take so many wonderful variations of all these people, but then I only get to pick one image per person. So one day I'm going to have to release the outtakes. When his son arrived, it became so loving and wonderful. Very dry Swedish humor, lots of teasing each other, father and son teasing each other. And it was just funny. It was just a joke a minute. And then with Alexander, we took the light a bit more edgy. We put it sort of quite high and to the sides because he can take it. You know, he's a gorgeous guy, and yeah, it just worked out well. Then we moved on to Mr. Ethan Hawke and Sydney Sweeney. This is a fascinating pairing because on one hand you have Sydney, who's sort of, you know, young, fresh-faced and new on the scene, and then you have Ethan Hawke, who, you know, started so young and has seen so many facets of the industry and played so many parts and has so many sort of feathers to his bow. Feathers to his bow. I think I mean strings to his bow or feathers in his cap. And so, you know, having his face, which is so full of like, you can feel the stories written on his face. So to have him next to her was a beautiful mixture. And so when we got to photograph him by himself, just, you know, I love the fact that everybody was wearing black. That was the sort of instruction. I said, I want everybody to wear black in this shoot, so that the clothes don't detract from the person, that the face is the thing that pops out. And we got, again, beautiful close-up portraits of this incredible face of his. And then I pulled out a little bit and said, again, I want to just start talking with the hands. And he needed no instruction. As soon as I just mentioned that, I didn't have to say anything else. He was moving his hands around, he was pointing to the camera, he was doing all this sort of stuff and some different poses, and just a fantastic shoot. Now with Sydney, I thought, you know, this is a younger person with a great fashion and great look. So I thought maybe we'll take this into a little bit more of a fashion style. So I got her into quite a strong pose, and then just a little touch of wind in the hair, and it was just to, you know, just to add a bit of fashion to it. And then to finish off these guys, this was such a fun shoot to do. Gentle giants, just so fascinating, just so gentle, so charming, so positive, but huge, massive, like so many shoulders. The shoulders were so wide. It was so difficult to try and get them both into the same frame without me being all the way back here because their shoulders were so broad. So I said, listen, maybe just try leaning on one and just putting an arm around. And finally we got into this position where it felt a little bit more intimate. I could go a bit more closer in, but still it was great. And this is a sort of very gentle, just like I said, gentle giants. And again with Brendan, I said, listen, we got some great still shots and some sort of just looking off and just moody kind of stuff. And I said, look, just to finish off, just try a couple of these things where as if you're like a boxer sparring with the camera, just tapping the camera and just weaving and ducking. And I think we had been sort of teasing the fact that they could both, him and Dwayne Johnson could both do the sort of the eyebrow lift. So I think he might have thrown that in the mix as well. And then this one, the last shot. I'm so glad I finished on this shot because I love this one. Because again, when I think of him, I think of, you know, action, I think of strength, I think of power, I think of size and muscle. And so I wanted to, and we got some great shots of him like pulled back, and you could see, you know, just, he's a very very fit guy. But I said, I want to go nice and close in where you don't see the muscles. There are no muscles to see here. And there's no eyebrow raising and there's no sort of action. There was some great shots of him smiling and cracking up laughing, which I'll show some other time. But it's just still. There was a moment of still, and it's pensive and it's gentle and it's like calm in the middle of the storm. And so I love this one. And that's what a great shot to finish off on. So that's it. I hope now all my friends can stop asking me questions about what people were like, and see you around.